Welcome to Hellenic Voice, the podcast that celebrates Greek culture. In each episode, we explore literature, poetry, archaeology, theatre, the Greek language, and the connections of Hellenism with other cultures, as well as with the Philhellenes around the world. Welcome to this very special episode where history, poetry, and personal experience converge in a truly unique setting. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Geoffrey Bond, author, collector, and lifelong Byronist. And we will talk about his latest book, Byron's Manor, Birthplace of His Poetry. But this isn't just a conversation about literature or historic estate. Geoffrey Bond actually lives at Byron's Manor, the very place where the young Lord Byron began crafting the verses that will go on to captivate the world. In our discussion, we'll explore what it means to inhabit such a space, to wake each day surrounded by the atmosphere, echoes, and inspiration of one of the most iconic figures of romantic poetry. Whether you are a dedicated Byron enthusiast or simply drawn to stories where the past speaks vividly to the present, this is an episode you won't want to miss. Geoffrey, first of all, thank you so much for joining me. You are not only a dedicated Byronist and the author of Byron's Manor, Birthplace of His Poetry, but you also live in the very house that played such a formative role in Byron's early life. I'd love to begin by asking, what does it mean to you personally to live in Byron's Manor? How has inhabiting that space shaped your connection to Byron and his work? Did your fascination with Byron begin before you came to live at Byron's Manor, or did living there spark and deepen that connection?
Well, Vasula, I bought the house 33 years ago, and I had some interest in the romantic poets at that time, Shelley, Keats, Coleridge, Wordsworth. But Byron really was the most exciting, I thought, of them, particularly with his life. So when the house came up for sale with my wife, we decided to buy it. Although when we arrived, I have to say, there wasn't a scintilla of Byron here, nothing. But we know from research and all the rest of it, that it had a huge connection to Byron. And now if you come to the house, it's full of Byron. If you look at my latest book, Byron's Manor, there's lovely photographs of the house and showing my collections. I'm told I have the largest library of Byron material by him or about him in private hands. So that purchase led me into studying Byron in more detail. Joining the Byron Society in London, I, in due course, became the chairman, sat on the Byron Society board in America. So what it has meant, the house, for me, are lots of friends around the world, lots of very interesting visits, and of course, all the time collecting not just Byron books, but objects and pictures. And the house has generated, for me, a huge amount of pleasure and interest.
Thank you, Geoffrey. I must admit that I had the privilege of having a special tour by yourself, and it was such an amazing experience. So thank you once more. So how does Burgage Manor itself reflect the character of Byron's poetry and personality?
Well, I think the main thing is, and the point of my book is that nobody's really written this before, despite the huge Byron canon, that the genesis of Byron's poetry was here in this house, not at Newstead Abbey, which is about 11 miles north of here. Byron's father died when he was 3, Mad Jack Byron, who'd met his mother in Bath. She had a fortune of £25,000, the equivalent today of about 5 million. And within 2 years, he'd spent all her money and given her baby Byron, passed off to France, where he died of drink. So Byron never really knew his father, but at the age of 10, he inherited the title as the sixth Lord Byron and came down to Nottinghamshire with his mother. Apart from the fact that Newstead Abbey wasn't in a very good state, he was a ward of Chancery, and he was not allowed to go and live at Newstead Abbey until he was 21. So after some time living in Nottingham in various places, Catherine Gordon, Byron's mother, found this house. It had just been built, 1802, 1803, so I think she was the first tenant. And she took the house from 1803 to 1809, although Byron left in 1808 on his 21st to go up to Newstead Abbey. And in any event, he used to go and visit Newstead Abbey when he was living here. But in those years, he was at Harrow School and at Trinity College, Cambridge. And it's where he wrote his first poetry. And as my book tells the reader, we have plenty of evidence to show that the books were written here about 1806, 1807, and he went over to a nearby town of Newark-on-Trent on the A1, where the Rich brothers had a very good printing firm. So those factors all combined to give Byron the publication of his Juvenilia, of his first 4 books, when he was here. And of course, it's a house, therefore, of immense significance, as I've told the local authorities of Southwell and Newark, who had living in this house in the early 19th century, one of the most famous men in Europe of his day, as famous as Napoleon. I think what my book has done is to highlight Byron as a potential tourist attraction. He is a tourist attraction, but there's not enough done to promote him, and they're hoping to have in Newark some form of centre where people can learn about Byron and be directed to various places he was connected with. So that's what Burgage Manor means. It's been a huge awakening of me and a huge awakening for a lot of people about the significance of Byron's life here. The first volume of poems he wrote, which was Fugitive Pieces, published in 1806, many of the poems were about the ladies of the town, and therefore they had a great influence on his writing. And a good friend of Elizabeth Piggott, who lived across the road from Byron, she was like an elder sister to Byron, and she assisted him in his writing. When the first volume came out, which was called Fugitive Pieces, there were only 50 copies just published for his friends. The Reverend Beecher, who'd directed him to the printers in New York, to the Ridges, he'd read the poem. He said, "Look, young Byron, some of these poems are a bit hot, for the people of Southwell." the poem to Mary in ecstatic posture lying, that's grateful to feeling our society. He said, "Dear boy, we must destroy it." So they destroyed all those 50 first copies except for 4. And those 4 copies are held, one at Newstead Abbey, which is incomplete, one in the Pierpont Morgan Library in New York, and one in University of Austin, Texas, and one in private hands. I mean, if that book ever came on the market, it would fetch a fortune. Now, the second book of poems he wrote, again for privately just for his friends, was called Poems on Various Occasions in 1807. And that was allowed to continue. And then the third book he wrote was for the public to buy. It was called Hours of Idleness. 500 copies of that were published. And that set him on the road to becoming a well-known poet. Because shortly after that, he left Cambridge and he left to go to London, where in due course he met John Murray, who was to be his publisher for a good deal of his life. So the significance of Southwell and its people and this house on Byron and his poetry, I believe, is very, very important.
Now, your book includes images, poems, and letters that shed new light on Byron's life. Could you tell us about the process of gathering these images and any particularly memorable discoveries? And
Well,
also, your book includes unpublished material and historic imagery.
yes, yes, I've been collecting for many years. For example, amongst the epistolary work I have are the letters that John Hanson had as Byron's lawyer with lawyers in Norfolk when he sold on behalf of Byron a piece of land he had in Norfolk, which he successfully sold for quite a lot of money for Byron. Now, those letters, they've never been seen before, and they're published in my book. There were some very unusual pictures. For example, the picture of Broad Street, Aberdeen, where we found, which was Byron's house where he lived with his mother in Aberdeen, and we've highlighted that in the book. And also the poetry in the book. At the end, there's a whole series of poems, about 15 poems, which Byron wrote when he was here in Southwell, but for one reason or another, I suspect because they were highly personal to the residents, they have been published for the first time. They had been researched by my old friend, Dr. Peter Cochrane, and I got permission from his daughter because he died some years ago, Peter. So they are completely new and have never been published anywhere before. And there are one or two portraits and engravings which are novel to the public. For example, the oil painting of John Hanson, Byron's lawyer. That's never been published before, as far as I know, and I've published that. So there's quite a lot of material which is novel and unique in the book.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Now, your earlier book, Dangerous to Show, focused on images of Lord Byron. How does Byron's manner build on or differ from your previous work about him?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand your question.
Yes, about your earlier book, Dangerous to Show.
Yeah. Yes.
Also focus on images of Lord Byron. How does Byron's manner build on or differ from your previous work about him?
Well, not a lot, really. I mean, I wrote that book. I co-authored it with Dr. Christine Kenyon-Jones from King's College, University of London. And again, it's a book nobody had ever written, a book on all the portraits and images and busts and things of Byron. Annette Peach did a very scholarly piece in the Walpole Review in, I think, 2000. There was no book on the subject, and Kristen and I, talking one evening, both shared the passion for portraiture of Byron and said, well, come on, we'll do it together. And that, I think, was very well received. It doesn't do any damage, if you like, the right word, to my book on Byron at Burgage Manor, because Byron at Burgage Manor only endorses, if you like, some of the earlier portraits of Byron in the work Dangerous to Show. So I think there's a degree of synergy between the two, and that I could write Byron at Burgage Manor the better for having done Dangerous to Show and studied and looked at all the portraits of Byron and when they were done and all the rest of it. And my book, Byron's Manor, has a very good painting of Mrs. Byron, of his mother, Catherine Gordon. And that is owned by John and Virginia Murray in London. And I'm very pleased to say they allowed my artist who does work for me to copy it, because I'd never get a picture of Mrs. Byron. So that's sitting in my house here, and that's in my book about Byron's Manor. And I don't think it's been shown very much before. And of course, it wouldn't have been in Dangerous to Show, because that was about Byron and not his mother or his relatives in any way.
So also Papa Byron's Manor marks Byron's bicentenary year. What do you hope readers will take away from the celebration of his life and works in
Well, I have
Byron's Manor?
well, what I want them to take away from Byron's Manor is the realization that this small cathedral town of Southwell in Nottinghamshire was the genesis of Byron's poetry. This is where it all began. Elizabeth Piggott, who lived across the road and is a well-known character in the Byron drama, if you like, Byron used to go across the road to talk to her when he was at Harrow and at Trinity. And in 1804, he went across to talk to her, and she was writing some poetry. And he said, well, you know, I like writing poetry. He said, well, come on, bring it across and let's have a look at it. And from there on, he never looked back. And that's when one of her relatives, Beecher, said to Byron, look, young Byron, if you're writing this stuff and it's worth publishing, I can introduce you to the printers in Newark, Samuel Ridge and his brother, and they will do the publications for you. So that's really a pretty important aspect of Byron's life. He never came back to Southwell, and he said some nasty things about it when he lived here, because he was always rhying with his mum, who was a mercurial little Scotswoman. But later in life, 1811, he writes to a friend and recommends Byron as being such a town as distressed gentlefolk could retire to with good conversation and cheap coals.
This is amazing. Thank you. Now, Geoffrey, as a renowned Byronist, how do you think Byron's cultural influence continues to resonate today?
Well, I think there's two aspects of Byron. There's his poetry, but also Byron was, of course, quite unusual amongst the aristocrats of his day. He was what we'd call a democrat. He believed in democracy and demos, and he said that nation shouldn't oppress nation. He spoke in the House of Lords in support of the Catholic Emancipation Bill, in support of the framework knitters who were being persecuted here in Nottinghamshire. And that's often forgotten. Bertrand Russell, the great philosopher, wrote a book, History of Western Philosophy, and he gives a whole chapter to Byron. Such was Russell's view of the importance of Byron on, particularly in the early 19th century, on democratic and political thought. Today, those aspects of his life are still studied, and I'm told, in terms of his poetry, he spawns more English literature PhDs than any other poet. Interesting, but that's true. But there are Byron societies all over the world. There's about 47 all over the world. There's still a great interest in Byron, notwithstanding that we live in the 21st century. And I think that's because he had so many aspects of his life people could relate to. He was born almost into a one-parent family. He was born in a call, as we call it. His father died when he was young. He was born with a disability. He liked men as much as women. He had an incestuous relationship with his half-sister. And all these characters mean that he is attractive to quite different sections of society. And I found that women and feminists rather like Byron, notwithstanding his perhaps his attitude to women. And people say to me, Geoffrey, do you have any gory details of Byron in bed and all that? And I said, no. So Byron never commented on his sexual life. He would comment on women he knew and he liked them, but he never went into those kinds of details.
Okay.
No.
That's interesting. Now, Geoffrey, you've had extensive experience with heritage, conservation, and education. In your view, what is the importance of preserving historical homes like Burgage Manor?
Well, here I am in Burgage Manor after 33 years. I'm lucky to say it's a beautiful house. It's got wonderful things in it, and quite a lot of my friends say, Geoffrey, well, you've got to leave this house to the nation. It's a wonderful locus and a wonderful representation of Byron and his work. But I'm afraid, Vasula, that's perhaps a request too far. Apart from anything else, if you leave a property to the nation, for example, the National Trust, you have to leave it with a substantial endowment. So sadly, I don't think I can do that. But at the same time, I'm happy that I've done what I've done and that it's put Byron on the map in Southwell. I feel confident that those who have read my book and taken up my request to promote Byron will bring to this town and to Newark more centres of information about him. So that, I think, will carry on into the future.
Well, I think it's really, really important to preserve, places like this because it's cultural, and thanks to you, I mean, some people like myself, we had the opportunity to, to live such an amazing experience. Which I think it would be great if many other people, especially the young generation.
The young love coming here and they love to hear about Byron. I think I shall have to see whether the Greeks want to buy it.
I love when we came to your place, you had the British flag and the Greek flag, You're such a hospitable person, So I think for everyone, it's a unique experience. And I think the nation needs to help you to carry on with this amazing job.
Well, I'd be open to suggestions if the nation in some way wanted to acquire it. But I have to remember that it's an important asset in my estate for my family when I've gone.
So you're a very busy person, Geoffrey. You've been involved in numerous pro bono initiatives, including the National Law Museum and educational scholarship programs. How do you balance your dedication to heritage with your commitment to, your so many other commitments or interests?
I like working. I like being busy. I like people. And all my heritage and intellectual interests all feed off each other, if you like. So I'm chairman of a number of trusts and they reach out into the community. And one of my great passions is helping young people in their education. That's one of my great interests, whether it's education in the world of literature or, as in some cases, in engineering apprenticeships. I feel very strongly about that. And of course, I realize that I might be seen as a polymath, a lovely Greek word, and I suppose in some ways I am. But I've been very fortunate to have been a lawyer, a businessman, a broadcaster, a writer. So all of them feed off each other, and it gives me huge connections of people who I know in different worlds, which is very useful.
And you still have this amazing enthusiasm about the things, which is so beautiful. It's amazing.
Yes, I'm boringly enthusiastic.
No, this is charismatic. It's a charisma. Now, where do we find your book? Where can we look for it? How do we get it?
You get my book at Waterstones are selling it, and on what's the thing you buy books on online? Amazon.
Amazon. Yes.
It's on Amazon. If you put my name in Amazon, the book will come up, and it's on Amazon. I think it's not £25; it's £19.99. and similarly at Waterstone. So those are two places where you can buy the book. Or if you can't get one, just get in touch with me, and I've got copies I can send to people.
And your website, please?
Yes, my website, you can look up and find all my sins. Geoffrey, Geoffrey, GeoffreyBondBooks.com, all one word, GeoffreyBondBooks.com will show you all my different activities and all the books that I've done and so on.
Thank you. And what is next, Geoffrey, before I let you go? Any plans? I'm sure you will never stop creating.
Much to my wife's horror, I'm thinking about another book on Byron, again on a subject that's not really been written about very much and would lend itself to a book that could be really well illustrated and attractive for people to read. I don't write heavily academic books. I write books I think that are interesting to people and let Byron speak for himself.
Yes.
And of course, the way to know Byron undoubtedly is to read his poetry. And if you think of some of his poetry, for example, he was made famous in 1812 by the publication of the first two cantos of Childe Harold. But in 1819, in Venice, he started writing Don Juan. And that went to 17 volumes. And I think that's one of the greatest, just not me, many people think it's one of the greatest pieces of satirical writing in the English language. So Byron is important and a heavyweight in quite a number of areas, both for English literature and his writing on democracy. And of course, the reason he went to Greece and died for Greece is to help the Greeks get rid of the Ottoman Turk, because he didn't believe nation should oppress nation. And subsequently, although it was after Byron's death, the Battle of Navarino, I think in 1828, Greece was free after over 400 years of the burden of the Ottoman Turk. So Byron, I think, was very instrumental in getting all that going and helping them, and with his money as well. And just very sad that on the 19th of April, 1824, he died in Messalongi, as you know. But he started everything going, and it's very nice to see how much today the Greeks respect and look up to and love Byron, really, and for what he did.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you again, Geoffrey. And I'm looking forward to our next chat when you have your new book ready. But till then, I will...
It's a great pleasure to speak to you. And I have to say, I do get interviewed by various people, but you're by far, your streets ahead is the most charming person I had to speak to.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, what a privilege it's been to step inside Byron's world, not just through his poetry and letters, but through the lived experience of someone who calls his former home home. A huge thank you to Geoffrey Bond for sharing his insights, his passion, and the stories behind Byron's Manor, birthplace of his poetry. It's not every day we get to explore history through the eyes of someone living in its heart. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share it with fellow lovers of poetry and history, and check out Geoffrey's book for an even deeper dive into the early world of Lord Byron. Until next time, thank you for listening and keep seeking the stories behind the worlds.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
For listening to Hellenic Voice. If you enjoyed this episode, please support us by sharing it, leaving your comments, and following us on social media so we can continue this journey through Greek culture together. Until the next episode, the voice of Hellenism continues.